The last sound she heard before her world split in two was a pop. Not an explosion, not a scream, just a pop. The kind of sound a knuckle makes when you crack it, casual and small and entirely out of proportion to what it meant. Then, the pain arrived. It didn't rush in. It installed itself. Bone deep and total, like someone had replaced her left forearm with a length of white-hot rebar and told her to keep running. She kept running. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Mara Voss, and she had been in the Navy for 11 years, 7 months, and she would later calculate, about 14 minutes before the moment her arm became a liability. She was 31. She had brown hair. She kept in a bun so tight it gave her a headache. She didn't loosen it. The headache reminded her she was awake. The guys in her unit said she ran like someone was chasing her. They were right. She just never told them who. It happened during a training exercise in the Coronado Mudflats, the kind of Tuesday that starts cold and wet and ends cold and wet, and somewhere in the middle asks you whether you actually want this bad enough to bleed for it. She'd wanted it since she was 9 years old. 9 years old, sitting on the floor of her grandmother's house in Tulsa, watching grainy Gulf War footage on a television with bad reception, and feeling something ignite in her chest that she didn't have a name for yet. Her grandmother called it stubbornness. Her mother called it a phase. Her older brother Marcus called it Mara being Mara, which was the kindest thing anyone ever said to her, and the thing she thought about most on the worst days. Marcus was gone now, had been for 6 years. She didn't think about that. Not during training. She thought about the objective. She thought about her breathing. She thought about keeping her feet moving through mud that wanted to swallow her boots whole. Then, she went over the wall wrong. The wall was 12 feet. Standard obstacle. She'd cleared it 400 times if she'd cleared it once. The approach, the jump, the grip, the hoist, and the control drop on the other side. Her body knew the sequence the way her body knew how to swallow. Automatic. Reliable. What her body didn't know was that Chief Petty Officer Delgado was going to slip in the mud on the other side of that wall and land directly in her drop zone. She saw him at the last second. She torqued mid-air to avoid him. Her left forearm hit the top rail of the wall at an angle it was never designed to hit anything at. The pop. She hit the ground, and her arm hit the ground, and her arm was doing something her arm should not be doing. Voss. Delgado was already on his feet, face gone the color of old concrete. Voss, your arm, I see it, she said. She didn't look at it. Looking at it would make it real in a way that real already was, but that she wasn't ready to negotiate with yet. There was still 40 minutes of exercise left. There were still 7 other people in her unit who needed to complete the course, and she was the one who brought them home. Always, that was the arrangement. That was the deal she'd made with herself when she took the commission, and she was not Voss. His voice had changed. Softer. Worse. It's a compound. You need to stop. She looked down. She stopped. The medical team was there in 4 minutes. It felt like 4 hours. She sat in the mud and held her arm against her body with her right hand and focused on a piece of trash, a torn wrapper from Protein Bar, yellow, caught in the wire fence 20 feet away, and she did not make a single sound. Not because she was tough, because she was terrified that if she started, she wouldn't stop. The wrapper flapped in the wind, in and out, and out. She breathed with it. The hospital in San Diego was beige. Everything in hospitals is beige, like they decided suffering needed a neutral backdrop. She lay in a bed that smelled like antiseptic and industrial laundry and listened to a surgeon named Dr. Reyes explain what had happened to her radius, and only using words that sounded like they belonged in a foreign language she'd been studying but hadn't quite passed yet. The fracture is severe, he said. He was a small man with careful hands. She noticed his hands. Surgeons' hands always looked like they belonged to someone else's body. Too precise, too deliberate, like each finger had been trained independently. There's significant displacement. We're looking at surgery, a plate, 6 to 8 screws. And recovery? He paused. Just slightly. Just enough. Dr. Reyes, she said. Recovery timeline. 8 to 12 months before you're cleared for full physical. My position. Another pause. Lieutenant Commander, SEAL certification requirements after a significant structural injury of this nature typically require, my position, she said again. Not louder. Slower. He looked at her the way people look at someone standing too close to a cliff edge. Like they want to help, but they also don't want to be responsible for what happens next. You need to go before a medical board, he said, to determine fitness for continued service. She nodded. She looked back at the ceiling. It was also beige. They put the plate in on Thursday. She counted ceiling tiles in pre-op, 17. She was under for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and when she came back up through the anesthesia, it felt like surfacing from black water, heavy and slow, and full of shapes that weren't quite things yet. Her mother was there when she woke up. That was the thing that almost broke her. Not the arm, not the surgery, not the 7 steel screws now living inside her body like small permanent house guests. Her mother, small, 63 years old, drove 11 hours from Tulsa with a casserole dish wrapped in foil in the backseat. Because that was what you did. You brought food. You showed up, you held your daughter's right hand, and didn't say anything for a long time, and then finally said, "Your brother would have been here." Mara closed her eyes. "I know, Mom. He would have driven through the night." "I know." Her mother's hand tightened around hers. Outside the window, the sun was doing something beautiful over the Pacific, and Mara didn't look at it because beautiful things on bad days felt like mockery. The first night alone in her apartment, 3 days post-surgery, arm in a brace and sling that made her feel like she was carrying a broken wing, she sat on the edge of her bed at 2 in the morning, and she did something she hadn't done since the funeral. She cried. Not pretty crying. Not movie crying. The other kind, the kind that comes from somewhere below your ribs that hijacks your whole body, that makes you ugly and loud and entirely too human for the version of yourself you've been performing for years. She cried until she ran out. Then she washed her face. Then she went to the kitchen and made coffee with one hand. One hand. The mug was heavy. The coffee maker was stupid. She knocked the grounds container off the counter, and it hit the tile and went everywhere. Dark powder spreading across white floor like something dramatic, like something from a movie about a woman at her lowest point. And she stood there in her boxers at 2 in the morning looking at coffee grounds on her kitchen floor. She started laughing. She laughed until she cried again. Then she cleaned up the coffee grounds with one hand. It took 22 minutes. The medical board was scheduled for 8 weeks out. She used all 8 weeks. The physical therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Bethany, who had the energy of someone who had stopped being impressed by anything years ago, set a recovery plan that was aggressive by standard metrics and insane by Mara's. Mara added 40% to everything on the plan without telling Bethany. Bethany found out. "You're going to tear the scar tissue," Bethany said, holding Mara's chart like she wanted to roll it up and hit her with it. "It's holding. I can see that it's holding. I'm telling you that it might not continue to hold if you keep. How far am I ahead of the timeline?" Bethany looked at the chart, then at Mara, then at the chart again. 3 weeks, she said, like the admission caused her physical pain. Then, "I'm not stopping." Bethany opened her mouth. 3 weeks ahead, Mara said, "On a compound fracture with plate and screw hardware." "I'm not stopping." Bethany closed her mouth. Then, she pulled up a chair and sat down. "Fine," she said, "but we're doing this right. Which means I need you to talk to me every session about pain levels. Actual pain levels, not your Navy SEAL pain levels, your human being pain levels. And if I say stop, we stop. Deal." Mara thought about it. Deal. She learned things about one-handedness that nobody tells you. Opening a jar is a full tactical problem. Putting on a sports bra is an exercise in creative engineering and mild profanity. Typing with one hand is doable, but humbling. Chopping vegetables is genuinely dangerous, and she has the small scar on her right thumb now to prove it. She also learned that the human body, given no choice, adapts in ways that border on rude. Her right hand got strong in ways her left hand had never been. Her grip strength numbers, she tested obsessively, climbed past her pre-injury bilaterally measured scores within 6 weeks. Her right shoulder suddenly, carrying the full burden of unilateral physical training, developed a density that her physical therapist noted with professional admiration and personal irritation. "You're compensating correctly," Bethany said at week 7. "I'm preparing," Mara said, "for the board. For after the board." Bethany studied her. "You're already planning what happens if they say no." Mara said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Week 7, Tuesday, she was doing pull-ups. One-armed pull-ups. Right arm only. The bar in her apartment door frame. The cheapest one at Target. Still in the plastic bag from the drugstore trip, where she also bought ibuprofen and coffee and a small cactus she named Gerald because she needed something alive in her apartment that she couldn't accidentally overnurture. 3 reps, 5, 8. Her arm shook at 11. She held the shake. Stayed with it. Let it be what it was, muscle at its edge, not failure, just edge, and pushed through rep 12 and 13, and then she dropped down and stood there in her hallway, breathing hard, sweat on her neck, left arm tucked in its brace, Gerald the cactus on the windowsill doing absolutely nothing, as cacti do. Marcus used to say, "The wall doesn't care how you feel about it. It's still there in the morning." He said about everything. His own chemo treatments. The second round of chemo. The third. The conversation they had in the hospital where he told her quietly and without drama, because Marcus had never been dramatic, that the numbers had stopped going the right direction. The wall is still there in the morning. She gripped the doorframe with her right hand. Her arm wasn't shaking anymore. 8 weeks out. Medical board. She walked in wearing her dress uniform. Left arm still in the modified brace. She'd chosen to wear it because hiding it felt like flinching, and she was done flinching. For officers seated across a table. Standard. She'd faced panels before. She'd been evaluated, tested, measured, questioned from every angle. She was not afraid of being looked at. She was afraid of the particular way these were looking at her, the way you look at something you've already made up your mind about and are just waiting for paperwork on. The senior officer, Captain Hargrove, silver-haired, expression like weather that hadn't decided yet, opened the folder in front of him. Lieutenant Commander Voss, 11 years of service, exceptional performance record, multiple commendations. He paused. Compound fracture, left radius and ulna. Surgical repair. 8 weeks recovery. Another pause. Longer. You're here requesting fitness assessment for return to full active duty. Yes, sir. Including operational field designation. Yes, sir. He looked at her arm. She did not look at her arm. Walk us through your recovery metrics, he said. She did. Every number. Every benchmark. Every week of data she and Bethany had assembled with the kind of exhaustive thoroughness that made Bethany's eye twitch in a way Mara chose to interpret as admiration. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment that felt like it had weight. Then, Captain Hargrove said something she hadn't prepared for. Why, he said. Not why return. Not why push. Just why. The whole thing. The whole shape of her. She was quiet for a moment. Then, she said, I had a brother. He had something that took things from him one at a time. Every appointment, something else gone. His hair, his weight, a year off the back in his life, then 2 years, then the doctors stopped naming the number. She looked at Hargrove directly. He never stopped getting up. Not once. Not even at the end. And he never had the option I have to fight it back. To actually do something about the thing that's trying to take him down. She let that sit. I have that option. The arm isn't taking me down. So I'm not going down. The board cleared her for limited duty pending 4-week reassessment. Not full operational designation. Not yet. But not out. She drove home and sat in her car in the parking lot for 11 minutes before going inside. She didn't cry. She didn't call her mother. She sat there looking at the parking structure's concrete pillar, stained, unremarkable load-bearing, and thought about what limited duty meant tactically. It meant she was still in the building. It meant the door was still open. She got out of the car. The unit received her back with the specific awkwardness of people who care about you, but don't know which version of you walked back in the door. Delgado found her in the equipment room on day 1. Running inventory, she didn't need to run because she needed something to do with her right hand while her left arm sat in its modified brace doing its long, boring work of knitting itself back into reliable architecture. Hey, he said. Hey, she said. He stood there for a second. He was a big man. Wide through the shoulders, quiet in the way that big men sometimes are, like they decided at some point that the world could hear them fine without extra volume. I've been carrying that, he said. The slip. My landing zone. You slipped, she said. That's what mud does. Mara Delgado. She looked up from the inventory tablet. You slipped in mud. I adjusted late and took the rail wrong. That's the whole sequence. You want absolution? Go find a priest. I'm doing inventory. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you're 3 screws ahead of where you were before the accident. Bethany told me your grip metrics. She put down the tablet. Bethany told you she's very proud of you. She's also deeply angry at you. It's a complicated relationship. Something in Mara's chest shifted. Half a breath. The kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Don't, she said. I'm not doing anything. You're doing the face. I don't have a face. You have a face, Delgado. You've always had the face. The one where you're trying to tell me something you think I won't want to hear, and you're deciding how hard the landing is going to be. He sat down on the equipment crate, which meant the landing was going to be hard. Rodriguez is doing your ops briefings, he said, while you're on limited. I know. He's good at it. I know he's good at it. The guys like him in the role. Good, she said. And she meant it. She really meant it. 80% of her really meant it. And 20% of her wanted to kick herself in the face for the other 20% that didn't. Rodriguez is solid. You should be doing it. That's how it works. Delgado looked at her with the specific look of someone who can hear the 20%. Mara, he said, I'm Fina. You lost something. I'm healing something. There's a difference. He didn't answer. He just stayed sitting on the equipment crate, big and quiet, letting her be wrong without arguing about it. She picked the tablet back up. After a moment, she said, How's he running the debrief structure? Differently than you. Better or worse? Different, Delgado said again, carefully. He's good. You're you. She looked at the inventory screen. The numbers didn't need her attention. She gave it to them anyway. Tell him to come find me if he wants to talk through the Mendez approach protocol. I wrote the original. I can save him 3 hours of reinventing it. Delgado nodded, stood up. And Delgado, she said without looking up. Yeah, you're not carrying the wall thing anymore. I'm releasing you. Formally. Consider it a signed document. A pause. Yes, ma'am, he said. He almost never called her ma'am. The 4 weeks of limited duty became 6 because her arm had an opinion about timelines that Mara's did not share, and she had to make peace with the 6 weeks being a negotiation and not a defeat. She made peace with it out loud, once, alone in her car, by saying, This is not a defeat, to the steering wheel. Then, she turned the car on and drove to PT. Week 9. The plate was integrating correctly. The bone around the hardware had stopped treating it like a foreign invader and started doing what bone does. Slow, patient, architectural work, building callus and density and new structure around the interruption, incorporating the metal into the story of her skeleton like the body, had simply decided this was always how she was supposed to be built. Bethany showed her the imaging. See this density here? Bethany traced a shadow on the X-ray with one finger. You've got stronger structural support at the fracture site now than you had in the original undamaged bone. The hardware and the healing tissue together are more load tolerant than what was there before. Mara stared at the X-ray for a long time. It's stronger than it was, she said. At that specific site, yes. Paradoxically, Mara repeated. She thought about that word for days. Paradoxically, as in the thing that broke was rebuilt into something that could take more weight than the thing that broke. As in, the injury was now the strongest point on the entire structure. As in, the worst thing that happened to her arm had, bone by bone, made her arm harder to break. She wanted to call Marcus and tell him. She reached for her phone twice. Both times she stopped. Both times she stood there in the feeling of it. The reflex that hasn't learned yet, the hand that still reaches for someone who doesn't pick up anymore. And then she kept going because that was the only direction there was. The second medical board was 4 weeks after the first. She walked in without the brace. The arm was there, left and right, symmetrical, hers, wearing the thin white seam of the surgical scar on the underside of her forearm that she'd stopped trying not to look at, and started looking at directly, the way you look at a thing when you've decided it's yours. Captain Hargrove was there again. Same seat, same weather that hadn't decided expression. She handed over Bethany's updated assessment before he could ask for it. He read it, passed it down the table, watched the other 3 read it with the specific calm of someone waiting to see if what he already knows will surprise anyone else. It didn't. Grip strength, right dominant hand, 98th percentile for cohort, he read aloud. Left non-dominant hand, post-surgical, 91st percentile. Full range of motion restored. Load-bearing metrics, he stopped, looked at her. Your load-bearing metrics are above your pre-injury baseline. Yes, sir. The hardware and the bone density at the repair site are paradoxically stronger than the original architecture, she said. Yes, sir. He looked at her for a long moment. Do you know why I asked you about Marcus? He said. In a first board. She hadn't expected that. No, sir, she said honestly. Because I've read the why, sir speech more times than you've had PT sessions, he said. Usually it's country, duty, the flag, family. All real. All true. But yours, the specific shape of yours, it wasn't about wanting to serve. It was about not being willing to be taken. He put the assessment down. That's a different engine. That engine runs longer. She didn't say anything. My son has the same thing, he said quietly. Not to the room. To her. Different cancer. Different timeline. But the same. He stopped. Reorganized himself behind the expression again. Anyway, the room was quiet in a way that had texture to it. Then, Hargrove said, Lieutenant Commander Voss, this board finds you fit for full return to active operational designation, effective immediately upon signature of the clearance form. She nodded. Yes, sir. Anything else? She thought about it. Tell your son, she said, that the wall doesn't care how you feel about it. Hargrove blinked. He'll understand it, she said. If he's anything like you. Hargrove looked at her for a long moment. Then just slightly, the weather on his face decided. Clear. Dismissed, Lieutenant Commander. The drive back to base, she called her mother. Her mother picked up on the first ring. She always picked up on the first ring, had for 6 years, ever since the phone call that came in the night, and that first ring was always too long, and said Mara in a voice that held the question and the hope and the fear all in the same 2 syllables. I'm back in, Mara said. A pause. Then her mother made the sound she made when she was trying not to cry. A small, press sound like grief wearing a coat. Good, her mother said. That's Mara, that's so good. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. The casserole dish has a crack in it now. I dropped it. The Pyrex. The Pyrex. Mom, that thing survived 30 years. And 1 distracted trip to the hospital, and I dropped it getting out of the car. Mara almost said it's just a dish, and didn't because it wasn't just a dish, it was the dish her mother brought to every hard thing for 30 years. And the crack in it meant something about what these last month had cost, and they both knew it. I'll get you a new one, Mara said. You will not. I'm keeping the cracked one. Mom, it still works. A crack doesn't mean broken. Mara stared at the road. A crack doesn't mean broken. 63 years old, 2-hour turnaround on an 11-hour drive. Casserole dish with a crack in it. I know, Mara said. Her voice was doing something she didn't fully control. I know it doesn't. Are you crying? I'm driving. You could do both. I'm a Navy SEAL, Mom. You're my kid, her mother said. Both things are true. She was quiet for a while, driving. The Pacific was doing something violent and beautiful off the 101, and she watched it in her peripheral vision, all that water refusing to stay still. I still reach for my phone, she said, finally, to call him. Her mother didn't say anything for a moment. Me too, she said softly. Every week. Something happens, good, bad, funny, doesn't matter. And she stopped. Let's sit. I think that's just what love does when it doesn't have anywhere to go. It keeps reaching. Mara nodded at the windshield. I should be back up there in 3 weeks, she said. Once I finish the return to field protocols. I'll bring the cracked casserole dish. I'll look forward to it. Mara, her mother's voice shifted. Got quieter. The real gear underneath the practical one. He knew, that you'd do this. Come back. He never doubted it. She had to pull air in carefully. Controlled. Old habit. I know, she said. She didn't know. That was the worst part. She knew exactly what Marcus would have said, in exactly what voice, with exactly what expression on his face. That particular grin of his half smug and half proud, the one that meant I told you so without saying it, because Marcus never needed to say the easy things out loud when the look said it better. Of course it rained. The Coronado mud flats didn't do ceremonies or clean starts or symbolic weather. They did mud. They did cold. They did the specific misery of wet clothing and heavy boots and a course that had no mercy for whatever story you told yourself on the drive-in. Mara stood at the start line in the dark at 0500, rain going sideways off the bay, the wall visible ahead. That wall, the same wall, 12 feet of wood and steel that had last seen her in a context she'd spent 5 months trying not to make into more than physics. And she breathed. In through the nose. 4 counts. Out through the mouth. 4 counts. Then, she looked at the wall. The wall did not look back. Rodriguez fell in beside her before the start. He was younger than her by 4 years, wiry and quick, the kind of build that looked deceptively light until you watched him carry twice his weight in gear across terrain that would leave most people horizontal. "You don't have to take the wall today," he said. "The protocol says you can sub the cargo net the first." "I know what the protocol says," she said. He looked at the wall, then at her arm. "Rodriguez," she said. "Yeah, I know what the protocol says." He nodded. "Okay, but thank you." He looked slightly startled. Rodriguez had worked with her for 3 years and had perhaps received 4 unsolicited thank yous. He took this one with care, like a handed object that might be fragile. "Sure," he said. "You did well with the ops briefings," she said. "Delgado told me. Delgado talks too much. He talks exactly enough. He ran the Mendez approach protocol exactly the way I'd have run it." "Means you listened." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "I used your original framework," he said. "Kept the timing structure, adjusted the abort criteria for the terrain variables we had that week." "That's correct use of the framework." "I know." A pause. "I had a question about the Eastern approach threshold criteria, but I didn't want to find me after this," she said. "I'll walk you through the threshold logic. It's not in the written version. Mendez and I built it in the field." Rodriguez nodded. The rain hit the back of his neck, and he didn't flinch. "Ready?" she said. "Whenever you are, ma'am." She looked at the course ahead of them. The mud, the walls, the cable run, the water obstacle that was ice cold in March, and didn't care about that any more than it cared about anything else. "Let's go," she said. She hit the wall at minute 14 of the course. The approach was 12 strides from the prior obstacle. Standard, muscle remembered, unchanged. She didn't think about it. She didn't perform not thinking about it. She just ran, and the approach happened the way 1,000 approaches had happened, body doing what body knew to do, and then she was at the base, and she was jumping, and her hands caught the rail, and her left hand caught the rail. Both hands. Both. The pull, the hoist, the scramble over, and then the drop on the other side, controlled, landing clean in the mud, both feet, knees absorbing it the way they were trained to, and she was running again before she registered that the wall was behind her. Behind her. Her left arm was fine. The arm that had been broken, plated, screwed, rebuilt paradoxically stronger than it was before. That arm had just carried her weight over a 12-foot wall in the rain at 0,500 in the mud flats of Coronado without complaint or ceremony. She kept running, but something in her chest, deep down in the part that had been held tight and careful for 5 months, released. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone watching would have seen. Just a small unlocking. The way pressure equalizes through a pinhole. She ran faster. After the course, standing in the equipment yard, soaked and muddy and breathing hard, Delgado appeared with 2 coffees like he'd materialized them from somewhere in his chest cavity. "Well," he said, "course is sloppy on the eastern water obstacle. Lip of the entry platform is rotting. File a maintenance request before someone takes it wrong and gets hurt." He stared at her. "That's your debrief," he said. "I'm debriefing the course." "I meant you." He gestured at her in a way that encompassed the wall, the arm, the 5 months, the whole shape of the thing. She took the coffee. It was hot and too strong, and she'd had it this way for 11 years. "Entry platform on the eastern water obstacle," she said. "Maintenance request. Today." Delgado sighed the sigh of a man who has accepted that certain people will only ever give you the practical answer, and that the practical answer is sometimes the only real answer available. Today, he confirmed. She drank the coffee. The rain had stopped. The mud flats were steaming slightly in the early light, cold air meeting where the activity had happened, thin wisps of fog coming off the ground like the earth exhaling. She looked at the wall. It looked like a wall. 12 feet. Wood and steel. Load-bearing. Unremarkable. "The wall doesn't care how you feel about it," Marcus said, somewhere in the back of her skull. "It's still there in the morning." "Yeah," she said quietly. To the wall, to Marcus, to no one specifically. "Yeah, it is." 3 weeks back on full operational status, a new trainee arrived in her unit. His name was Okafor. He was 24, built like someone had designed him specifically to intimidate people who needed intimidating, and he moved like every room he walked in had been arranged wrong, and he was quietly correcting for it. He was also observably afraid, not of the training, not of the physical demands. He was exceptional on those metrics, and he knew it, and he carried that knowledge with the specific lightness of someone who's always been physically capable and has started to believe that capability is the same as readiness. He was afraid of failing to be what he thought he was supposed to be. She knew that fear. She'd worn it like a uniform for years. She watched him on the third morning. Course run, post-time debrief. The group clustered around the whiteboard in the briefing room, where she was walking through the week's performance data. He was in the back, absorbing, processing at speed. Good instincts for the pattern analysis, better than average retention, slight overcorrection on the Eastern approach timing that suggested he was running his own internal model instead of the field protocol. "OK4," she said. He straightened. "Mom." "Eastern approach. You're timing your entry 2 beats early." "What?" He paused. "It felt faster, ma'am." The standard entry felt like it was giving up half a second. "It is giving up half a second," she said. He blinked. "The half second is structural," she said. "You're giving it up so you don't lose 2 seconds in the water transition, which is what happens if you enter fast, and your entry angle is off by 4 degrees because you rushed the setup." She pulled up the approach diagram. The protocol isn't slow. The protocol is building the correct platform for the next problem. You're solving for the current problem and ignoring the next one. He looked at the diagram. "The margin looks counterintuitive," he said. "Every correct margin looks counterintuitive until you've seen what happens when you don't take it." He nodded slowly, something shifting behind his eyes, not acceptance yet, but the beginning of it. The moment when the intellectual acknowledgement and the physical understanding start to merge. "How long until it's automatic?" he said. "Ask me again in a year." He almost smiled. "Caught it. Does it get easier?" he said. All of it. The weight of it." She looked at him for a moment. 24 years old. Afraid of the wrong things. Capable of more than he'd been asked for yet. About to be asked for things that would reshape what he understood about himself in ways you couldn't describe from the outside. "No," she said. "But you get stronger. And eventually the gap between the weight and your capacity to carry it stops feeling like a deficit." He was quiet. "My brother told me that," she said. "More or less." She clicked to the next diagram. "Again," she said. From the top. Eastern approach. Her mother came up that weekend with a cracked Pyrex. The casserole was something with chicken and vegetables and whatever her mother had in the pantry, which meant it tasted like home in a way that nothing else did, and probably nothing else ever would. They sat at Mara's table and ate, and the conversation went, whether in Tulsa, the neighbor's new dog, her mother's book club, and the book they'd chosen that everyone hated, including her mother who'd chosen it, Gerald the Cactus, getting a suspicious amount of direct sunlight. Then, somewhere in the middle of the second serving, "Show me," her mother said. "What?" "The arm. The scar." Mara rolled up her sleeve. Her mother looked at it for a long time. The white line on the underside of the forearm, thin and clean, the slight topography where the bone had rebuilt itself around the hardware. The nothing wrong of a limb that had been broken and was not broken anymore. Her mother traced one finger along it. Light. The way you trace something you're trying to memorize. "Marcus had a scar," she said. "From the port. Up here." She touched her own collarbone. "I memorized it. I would look at it and think that's where they put the medicine in. That's where the fight was happening. That's the door." Mara didn't say anything. "This is your door," her mother said quietly. "Yours is different. Yours went the other way." Mara looked at the scar. The door. "I keep thinking I should have something conclusive to say about it," Mara said. "Like a lesson. Or a summary. Some version of the story where it means something clear." "It doesn't have to mean something clear," her mother said. "It just has to be yours." Outside, the Pacific was making noise a half-mile away. That constant low conversation it had with the shore, the same conversation it had been having for as long as there was a shore to have it with. Nothing resolved. Everything continuing. She reached over and put her left hand over her mother's. The arm was fine. The arm was paradoxically, impossibly, structurally stronger than it had been before anyone snapped it. And they sat there, the two of them, with the cracked casserole dish on the counter, and Gerald on the windowsill, and the Pacific doing its thing in the dark, and no one said anything more about it, because some things don't need more words. They just need to be held. 6 months after full reinstatement, she was running the Eastern Water Obstacle approach at 0500 with her unit behind her, Rain going sideways off the bay the same as it always did, the mud flats in their permanent state of indifference. She hit the entry timing exactly right. Half-second deliberate pause. Entry angle precise. She cleared the transition clean and came up in the water on the correct side and pushed into the next problem without breaking stride. And behind her, she heard Okafor hit his entry and then the water, and she didn't look back because they didn't look back. You kept going. That was the job, but she heard his entry. On the correct beat. Half-second pause. Correct angle. Not fighting the protocol anymore. Running inside it. Using it, treating it as what it was, the platform for the next problem. She kept going. The wall was ahead of her. She hit it at full stride and cleared it and landed clean and didn't think about it all. She just ran. Later, in the debrief, she was running water obstacle timings on the board when she noticed Rodriguez writing something on a notepad and passing it to Delgado, who read it and made the face he always made when something was too true to argue with. She finished the timing analysis. What, she said. Delgado showed her the notepad. Rodriguez had written, "She runs like someone is chasing her." She looked at the note. She thought about what to say. "I know, it's a bad habit. I'll correct it. I run to something not from something." And then she just handed it back. "Yeah," she said. She clicked to the next slide. "Now, approach protocols. Rodriguez, you're walking us through the Mendez threshold criteria. From the top. Because Okafor needs to hear the logic, not just the rule." Rodriguez looked at Okafor. Okafor got out his notepad. The work continued. It always did.